Okay, thank you all for joining us. This is Dana Wilcott, the Family Services Coordinator for Pflugerville ISD. I am happy to share with you all our February Lunch and Learn. Phew, it's typical for their age by the beautiful Kate from Ensemble Therapy. Just so you all know, this is being recorded. I will let people in as they join us. There will be time for questions and answers, and I will introduce Kate to you all. Hello, Kate.
Hi. Yes. So I am going to be talking about some developmentally appropriate behaviors that you should be seeing today. So you can get to know me. Oh, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've got the recording thing. Just so you guys can get to know me. My name is Kate. I am a licensed specialist in school psychology, which means that for most of my day, I am assessing kids. And so I am an expert in developmentally appropriate behaviors for basically people that are 3 all the way up to 22. I am also a parent coach and the executive functioning coordinator at Ensemble Therapy. And then in addition to that, I am also a parent of 3 kids. And so oftentimes we'll talk about what's best practice and then talk about also what might be real life. And so that'll be today. I would like to have you guys drop in the chat really quick who you are and just give me kind of like the ages of your kids so I can make sure to tailor the presentation to the ages that we have. I'm going to click on the chat so I can see. Give everyone a couple of minutes, and then once I pop that down, I'll just kind of tailor it to those people. Okay. 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 Okay, so it looks like we have some ages basically from 4. Oh, we have high school too. Okay, I wasn't planning on focusing too much on high school because they're a little bit different than developmentally where I was aiming for. I was doing more like elementary, but we can talk a little bit about some high school components as well. Okay, so we basically have 3 to 11 and then high school. Okay. All right, I'm gonna hide this. Okay. So today what we're going to be talking about is, like we discussed, the specific developmental needs and challenges for your kids at different ages. We're also going to talk about some developmentally appropriate practices you can implement to connect with your child, when to reach out for help should you have concerns that are beyond what are expressed in the developmentally appropriate ranges. I also will help you kind of recognize some consistent routines that you might be able to put in place with your family as we start this new year and do new routines. If anybody was in the presentation that I did around this time last year, we did talk a lot about routines and went in depth, and we're just going to kind of gloss over that today, but talk about some developmentally appropriate chores that your kids can do to participate in and be a part of that family. Cohesiveness. Okay. So the big question that I hear a lot, both as a school psychologist and then also as a parent coach is that normal? Like, is that really appropriate? Most of the time it is. Kids are just bananas. But what we're going to go through today is looking at these spectrums like these for each age, but know that each child is unique. So I'm basically just pulling what's developmentally appropriate for each age. If your child is outside of the norm, it depends on how far outside of the norm and if that is something that impacts your family on a daily basis. And then we might discuss kind of next steps for addressing some support. You also might notice, and especially for parents of multiple kids, you might kind of have that perspective of if your child is someone who sat up late, crawled late, walked late, they might be someone that reads a little late too. And that's okay because everyone has their own kind of curve of development. The things that could impact development are also if you have a premature child if before 30 weeks or 36 weeks, pardon me, It also might be if there was huge stressors or disruptions in their life that can also cause the development to go a little bit slower. And again, the biggest thing that we always want to see as people that are doing these assessments and looking at development is there progression? I always get more concerned when there's stagnation or when there's a huge discrepancy between behaviors. Also, looking at your child and who they are and just embracing them for who they are, regardless of where they fall within this developmental spectrum. Okay. Okay. So the basic principles of development is that children develop best in, and this is something that you probably have already heard a million times, so it's going to be redundant, but they develop best in an environment of physical and emotional safety. Okay. We look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the first thing your child needs is that safe, secure environment. And if they have that, then they can develop and grow. Like I said earlier, if there's disruptions in that, and it could be for any wide variety of stressors, it could be due to, stressors for kids when we look at them are, death in the family, could even be the death of a pet. It could be big moves, frequent moves, school changes. Sometimes if parents separate, can also be a disruptor or a stressor for the child. Any sort of sociological or living changes can sometimes be stressors for them as well. And so what that means is in those times of stressors, you just don't expect the development to progress as it was or develop as you would expect a child of that age to develop. Know that there might be a little bit of regression. And that's okay. They need love, they need support, and they need that patience during that time. The other part is that higher is not better. And this is something that I think oftentimes parents of younger children, but you could even argue that middle and high schoolers too, fall into the trap of is you look at your kid and then you look at the kid next to them in that first grade classroom, and that kid is reading chapter books and your kid is reading, the very basic kindergarten books still. And so know that higher is not better, faster is not better. Everyone is going at their own rate. And they will be able to read. And if they stop or their progression stagnates, like we said, then that's when there is that time to kind of get worried or get concerned. The other part about development is it just cannot be rushed. There's nothing, you can provide supports and you can provide opportunities and you can provide intervention, but they're going to progress at their rate of progression. And so sometimes those supports can help them go a little bit faster, but know that it's not something that you can rush or wish to be faster. And development isn't necessarily defined by a set of skills, although that's a little bit of an interesting thing because today we're going to look at sets of skills that define the development. But what I'm trying to say when I write this is that development is not just this concrete set of pieces of information that you're going to see. But what it really is that it's that whole child. I mean, look at them and you might notice that they're really growing fast through those cognitive skills, but that their motor skills might be a little bit lower than you expect. And so know that there can be that unevenness and that disruption to the balance. Okay. All right. So I'm going to skip over the 2-year-olds because we don't have any of those, but I am going to say that I told this to Dana. I'm going to email you guys or email Dana a PDF that has all of this information because this is a lot per slide. Okay. And I'm not going to spend a super long time on each slide, but I will send you a PDF that has all of this information. Okay. So our first age that we have is the 3-year-old age. And that's someone said they have a 3-year-old. So I'll kind of walk through this. And so each of the slides are going to be organized in the brain and cognitive development we expect, the emotional development, the relationship and social development, the typical challenges. And then on the next page, it's going to be some tips and then when to seek help. And again, you're going to have all this information in a PDF. I'm going to highlight the parts right now that I think are important or of note. You'll also notice as you look through the PDF, if you look through the PDF, that some of the things are the same for similar ages. And that's because for a 3-year-old, we might see some of those same things in a 4-year-old. Not everything, obviously, because they're 2 different ages, but some of those similarities you might notice, okay? So as you kind of take a moment and read through this, I'll give you a sec. So what we typically see in 3-year-olds that starts to come out is it's really cool because they are starting to move out of the egocentric phase. And what I mean by that is if you've met a 3-year-old, they are egocentric. They're very selfish. They are the most important person in the room, but they start to notice that other people are doing other things around them, even if they're not engaged in it, which is kind of cool if you think about it, because one, that's how we form memories. So that's when people first start to have memories. The other thing is like if you've met a 2-year-old, if they put a blanket over their head, they think that everything stops or that you can't see them. Playing hide and go seek with a 2-year-old is the best. But 3-year-olds start to realize like, oh my gosh, even though I'm asleep, my mom is still doing things. Or even though I go to school, the world doesn't stop around me. And so that's a cool time period. Now, 3-year-olds have a lot of challenges that come with them, as anyone who's ever parented a 3-year-old. They, really, as they realize that other things are going around on them, they do try to hold a lot of that control. You might notice more temper tantrums, very frequently becoming upset. And it's a challenging time for especially kids that are more sensitive or more feeling. They might have some more sensory complaints that they start to notice and experience. The other thing that's neat about 3-year-olds is they really start to identify who their friends are. In their preschool class, likely, or the playground, everyone's a friend, but then they start to really have preferential friends at 3. It's a fun age, but also wild. Okay. So for 3-year-olds and a lot of the other ages, you'll see they love a good routine, hence why we're talking about them at the end of the presentation. They like a consistent routine. They like to know what's coming. If you start to notice these kind of moments of when to seek help for a 3-year-old is like we said before, like if things that were not happening as far as regression start to happen, like they are having more toileting accidents than they were, but they've been toilet trained for 6 months. Or if you notice that they're having a lot of trouble sleeping, this is sometimes when night terrors can occur. If you notice that they are having extreme separation anxiety. They were always kind of clingy, but now when you try to leave at work, they're screaming, leaving them, they're screaming and crying. Those are times to start to get a little bit concerned. I'm going to move on, but I'm going to leave a chunk of time at the end for questions. So if you have a question, please do not hesitate to ask at the very end. I'll leave a big chunk of time. Okay. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. All right, 4-year-olds. Okay, 4-year-olds are fun. So what you'll notice about your 4-year-olds is this is that pre-K age. So if your child is in pre-K, one of the biggest things that parents will say to me about their 4-year-olds is I'm really concerned about their attention span. It's just so short. 4-year-olds do have short attention spans. There is a lot going on that they are super jazzed about and interested in, whether it is their friend sitting next to them, or that butterfly, or that flashing light, or it can seem like your 4-year-old has ADHD. And that's just developmentally appropriate. Their brain is going through this massive growth. And in that massive growth is coming just a lot of inputting information. And so their brain is trying to figure out what's important and filter all those pieces out so they can focus and put their focus in the right space. But they do seem, kind of inattentive or hyperactive, or as though they have difficulty focusing. Your 4-year-olds are also, this is the beginning of like those rule followers. It gets worse until we talk about like the 6-year-olds are kind of like your policemen, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But your 4-year-olds love rules. They love a good rule. If you tell them that it's a rule, likely they're going to follow it. It's a rule. You have to wear your shoes in this place. If you don't, we have to leave. They also are still in an age where they very much want to please you. Which is great as a parent because you can utilize that. The temper tantrums happen, but a lot less frequently, where the peak is supposed to be going down. Now, again, not for every kid, but for most of your kids. 4-year-olds also that's when you might notice that they start to get some big fears that pick up. This is when they're like, I'm scared to go to sleep because I heard, a whisper in my closet. That's when that behavior really picks up speed. Again, you might see it with your 3-year-olds, definitely going to see it as they get older, but that's when they start to have some of those like anxious feelings or nervousness feelings. So really supporting them through that, talking to them, listening to them, giving them that time. 4-year-olds love attention. They love one-on-one attention. As do most kids, right? You can say these things for a lot of developmentally appropriate behaviors, but they really thrive in that, especially to talk through all these fears or big feelings that they're having. Something that parents ask about is it still normal for my 4-year-old to wet the bed? Yes, that is something that often comes up with 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. Technically, your pediatrician isn't going to start to get up kind of like nervous about it or thinking about it until they turn 8. Which if you have a 4-year-old that wets the bed, you're like, oh my God, 4 more years. But most kids are going to be starting to go down in that behavior and you won't experience it as much. When to get concerned is like I talked about with those fears and anxieties as they pick up, if it starts to kind of inhibit you in your daily functioning, your daily life, like they don't want you to put on their shoes because last time their shoes pinched them and now they're worried that they're always going to be pinched and they're scared of their shoes, so they're refusing to wear shoes. You also might notice, especially towards the end of the 4-year-old year, we see some aggressive behaviors start to pick up too. And again, it only starts to be a concern when it impacts your family or when the frequency or the intensity is so that you kind of can't get through your day, or you're making all these like circumvents around their behaviors to get through your day. All right, 5-year-olds, they are an exciting age because that's when kids go to kindergarten. This is another year where we see a huge amount of growth. Not just because most kids are in kindergarten, but also because there's another big cognitive leap that occurs during this time. You might look at a picture of your 5-year-old when they enter kinder and when they exit, and it's like you see the big kid when they exit kindergarten. They look so much older. They're more mature. Their fine motor skills improve. Cognitively, there's just, like I said, a lot of growth and understanding, which is why this is the age we typically start school. 5-year-olds are able to really remember a lot. They are fun to have discussions with because as that understanding of their outside world improves, they also start to realize and have connections with people outside of you and relationships outside of you and your family. So they might have, their kindergarten teachers, their new best friend, and then they have friends in their classroom. Again, similar to the 4-year-old, we see a lot of nightmares pick up at 5. A lot of times it's because they're overtired, they're overstressed. That's when those behaviors really start to pick up. A lot of times, for anyone that's experienced a kindergartner, knowing those first 6 weeks of kindergarten are just, it's tough. It's a big significant change. And you as a parent probably see more nightmares, tantrums, all those pieces. And it's due to that huge, huge transition. Your 5-year-olds are also the kid. They just love making friends. They love going to the park. Everything is, I think that they see glitter and, unicorns all the time. They're typically very cheery. They can express themselves. You're communicating with them. When you kind of look for those pieces of when to get concerned about parts is still looking at those anxious, if you're seeing this big spike in anxiousness, or they're refusing to go to sleep any nights and their fear of nightmares is just so vast. The aggressive behaviors is something we keep an eye on in this age as well. You might also notice that they're really, as a toddler, they say no, and they put their foot down. But when it happens with a 5-year-old, it's a little bit different. And so they're trying to really, as they've moved through kindergarten and have all those big developmental changes, they want more autonomy and control. So this is another time and phase when parents most often notice it's kind of akin to your 2-year-old that starts screaming when you buckle them in the car seat. Well, it's because they want to buckle themselves. Your 5-year-old is doing those same behaviors in the same ways because they really want more autonomy and control. Okay, 6-year-olds. So 6-year-olds are interesting because they start reading typically around this age. They start picking up those letter number skills. They really love movement. Okay. If you walk into a kindergarten classroom and those kids are sitting still, then, I would be like, okay, let's get them moving. They love movement. They need movement to learn. You might notice that your 6-year-old can't sit still at the dinner table, or if you force them to sit, they're only there for 2 minutes and then they're off. So making sure that you build in a lot of movement for their day. They like to, if you have the ability to walk to school, walk to school. If you have the ability to bike to school, bike to school. Giving them any opportunity you can for movement. It's going to help them be more regulated. Your 6-year-old is also just so talkative. They talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and they want to tell you everything about everyone. As a parent, who has older kids, especially teenagers, they'll say, I wish they talked more, but they might be forgetting how much a 6-year-old can talk. This is also a time when we start to see like some competitiveness. You might have seen some like toddler competitiveness with siblings, but when they turn 6, it seems like it kind of takes on a new form of color. It can be just more argumentative. They are competitive. They want to be the first. They want to be the best. I am the best. And then I'm going to talk to you about it for an hour. When this is the age as parents that we really focus on those peer relations, because they have so many peer relations, they want so many peer relations, but how to be a good friend and how to be a good sport. Your 6-year-olds, even though they are big and strong and smart, they're also hypersensitive too. And they still have that kind of those, they want to please you so badly. And so making sure that you're still being kind, being kind with your words, not as though you were talking to a toddler, but kind and patient. This is when we start to notice, and parents most often tell me they're worried about reading this 6-year-old age range. And that's because, like I said earlier, there is a whole spectrum for development. And so in a first grade classroom, you might have a kid that's 7 or even 8, and you might have a kid that just turned 6 a week ago. Obviously this is the start of the year because of the cutoff in the state. It wouldn't have been a week ago now. But your 6-year-old, you cannot rush the reading progress. You can support it. You can read to them. You can, introduce as much language-rich environment as you can into your family and your home, but really knowing that they're going to progress through that 6-year-old year. And I don't start to get concerned about reading until they turn 7. And then if they're still really not progressing or they're stagnating, then I'm more concerned. But 6-year-old is such a big developmental year as far as the reading. Okay. So 7-year-olds. So this is that year where I said we start to look and notice like, okay, how's the attention? How's the behavior? How's the reading? This is, that end of first grade, start of second grade year where we're really starting to up the ante for expectations in the school setting, at least. Your 7-year-olds are observant. They're good at problem solving. They love friends. You might notice that this is when some of those personality pieces, like if your kid is a more quiet or introverted child, they might start to withdraw more, not in a bad way, but they might find that they do really well if they can have more downtime or reading time or art time in their room. This is sometimes, and I have it on here as a typical challenge. This is something that can pop up for a variety of ages, but for some reason for 7-year-olds, loss and death is something that I'm not sure if it's just where it hits them in their brain growth or development, but they really struggle with it. They hyper fixate on it. They want to talk about it a lot, or they don't want to talk about it at all. And then all of a sudden they'll unload all these things they've been thinking about for you. As similar to all the other ages, making sure you're giving them that one-on-one time and support. We do expect that kids are doing chores starting when they're younger or starting to help around their family, whatever you guys call it as far as that. But your 7-year-old can do a lot of things. And I think sometimes they're stuck a little bit between that first grade them and then the third grade where responsibility just picks way, way up. And so knowing that they can have a lot of responsibility and they can help around the house, they still really want to help around the house. Keeping their routines consistent, the nightmares and night terrors are typically starting to go down. This is though, the when to seek help part is similar to what I said at the start of the 7-year-old. That's when we start to pay attention to focus, and those academic skills. So 8 is another big cognitive growth year. That's when they get into 3rd grade. If anyone has ever been around a 3rd grader, especially in the middle of the year or after, you notice like there's a big piece of responsibility that picks up or should be picking up. Third grade is, I would say for me, as a school psychologist, when I see the most referrals for any sort of learning difficulty or any sort of like attention, like ADHD-esque behaviors. And that's because when you look across a third grade classroom, you can see the kids that have kind of leveled up, and they are in that they're responsible, they're, aware of their learning, they're aware of what they need to do, they're reading for comprehension, not working on reading for fluency anymore. And then there's some peers that stick out more. This is when the teachers really start to notice and get concerned. And where you as a parent might notice it too, if you're at the playground and you see your kid playing and they're just like talking at their peers, they're not necessarily communicating with them, or you notice that their peers are able to stay on, one structure or play for a long time, and your kid's hopping around to all the different structures. And so that's the time when we really start to notice that. Peer development is a big one at this point. It really picks up as they get older. The kind of rule of thumb is that up until kids turn 10, they get most of their input, like morals and structure and support, from parents. And then after they turn 10, they start to look more to their peers for those things, as anybody of a teen can tell you. But this 8-year-old years when we start to really see that, really observing what peers have and wanting. So this is also a time when your kids can have they're very into shows or gaming with their friends. And so just making sure that you're starting to really get that tablet time. They're going to really start to argue and talk back with you about how that looks, because my friend has this much time and this, and you might have seen some of those behaviors at this when they were 6, but this is when we really see some of that stuff pick up speed. So having those conversations around media and what being a good, citizen online looks like, and obviously still heavily monitoring them. There's a presentation that I gave that's on the Pflugerville on the YouTube site that Dana mentioned, all about that, if you're curious about it, if it's something that's kind of going on in your home. I would say that this is, like I said, a year where I see a lot of referrals. And so just paying attention to your kids and how they're progressing academically and behaviorally, having some good talks with teachers. All right. So 9-year-olds. So this is when, it's such, I love 9-year-olds. I have a 9-year-old right now. And it's such a fun age because they are so smart, and they are so thoughtful about their world and their environment, but they're also realizing at this point that things aren't always great around them, that bad things are happening. And did you know this? Did you know this happened? And you're like, yes. And it's because they're reading more and they're comprehending more, and their teachers are teaching things at a higher level. They're learning about Texas history in school. It's a very fun year. It's also a year when we start to see, especially amongst girls, some of those peer difficulties really start to pick up speed, depending on the school and the classroom environment and all those different components. But that's when we start to see some meanness or some fighting or picking on. Sometimes some bullying can really occur at this age as well. They're very concerned about that, like peer acceptance, and it can be something that can be very difficult as a parent to witness. Making sure that you start to give your child more privacy. The 9-10-year-old age is sometimes for families that is when they might move out of that room with their siblings. They might start wanting more privacy when they're changing. They might, if you guys always had the kids bathe together, they might start wanting to bathe separately. So really being responsive to their kind of natural cues that they're sending to you, and giving them that privacy, and also talking to them about, and this is something that they'll be talking about in school, but talking about with them as their bodies are changing, some things to expect, both emotional and physical. It's a big year for that. All right, 10-year-olds. So most parents find 10-year-olds to be a pretty good year. Like some parents will be like, oh, those 3-year-olds, those are a tough year. But 10-year-olds are a fun year. They're in 5th grade. They're about to go to middle school. They're typically pretty calm, easygoing. They figured out a lot of their coping skills when they feel dysregulated. Most of the time I don't see parents with 10-year-olds in parent coaching. It's other ages, both above and below. It's they're really starting to figure out who they are in their peer groups. Being at the top of their school, they're feeling pretty confident about themselves, pretty cool. We normally have identified if there is a learning disability or attentional difficulty by this time as well. This is, sometimes some of the pieces that can occur is some anxiety as they are going to be exiting that kind of comfort and cushion of their elementary setting. We see too as 10-year-olds, they really, so sometimes that anxiety can pick up. But also we see as 10-year-olds, they're faster at processing information. Like this is when your IQ is really stabilized. And so we see, it's just a cool year cognitively for us to assess because they have good, strong verbal skills. Their visual spatial skills are often very, good. They can solve visual puzzles. They can, help their parents like read a map and like I said, that processing speed is faster and their fine motor and gross motor skills are, at a level in which you as a parent can like have fun playing with them. And of course you did earlier, but you noticed such a big step up in that year. This is a time when, because of such an increased independence is often a time when some families consider phones. So if that's something your family considers, talking about social media, if they have access to that, this is a time when if you notice that your child is developing at a slower rate or they're very immature or physically look very different than their peers, it really starts to stand out because of that just huge increase in independence that your 10-year-olds have. So that's the end of the kind of like talking about development portion. I know we have some 11-year-olds in here. But like I said, I'll send that PDF and we'll talk at the end about questions. But does anybody, I don't know, sometimes I get very burning questions. Does anybody have a big question that they have to ask right now? Because it's kind of a natural break time before I start talking about the routines. I'll pull up the chat and see. Yes, Dana said she'll be sending that. Okay. Anybody have any big question? They can either say it verbally or write it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to routines and then we'll do more question time at the end.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Rachel, and the first time I'm using this, so I'm a little bit confused. I'm sorry if I didn't find the chat.
That's okay. So someone said, how do we break a habit gently? It depends on what the habit is and what their age is. So what's the age?
Hi, thank you for all the information so far. This is me, Pallavi. I had typed that comment in. So our kid's age is 7, and the habit is not something like nasty or difficult. The habit is that he, instead of getting ready in the mornings for school, he likes to read for a few minutes, and those are like precious few minutes in the morning to get to the maybe bathroom or get dressed and like all those things. So I have not been able to break that habit as might as I have tried. And I just want to be gentle and kind in my approach. I don't want to force or have waterworks right there at 6:30 in the morning. So yeah, so I was hoping if you have any strategies of how I can gently or very without even his knowing try to break that habit of his and do something about it.
So I'm clear. So he's, instead of starting kind of his morning routine, what did you say he's doing? And you said it takes a precious few minutes, but I missed what he was doing.
Yeah, he like comes downstairs, and instead of doing the morning routine, he sits on the couch and starts to read his favorite book or comic or whatever.
Okay. Because that feels good in the morning. I wish I could do that instead of starting my morning routine. So basically, and we'll talk about this, the routine part, but what'll be really effective for him is to kind of talk with him and say, like, I know you like to read. but we also need to get out in the morning. So let's make a list of things you need to do in the morning and have him, if he likes to write, have him write it. Otherwise, if he doesn't like writing, scribe it for him and make like a little checklist for him in the morning. You can write it on his mirror so he can check it off with a whiteboard marker, or if you have a little whiteboard or even just a sticky note. And then have him have his read time, because he probably loves that read time at the end. And if he's like, I hate it at the end, I refuse to do it at the end, then talk to him about how you're going to wake him up a little bit early to account for that extra time, and then set a little visual timer or something so that he can be more in charge of it rather than
Okay.
you telling him.
Got it. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Someone else asked about the online content. If you watch that presentation that's on the YouTube channel about navigating that kind of online behaviors, I can't remember, Dana, what it's called. What's the presentation called?
We did. I will
Help
actually
my kids stuck to their screen or something like that. And
yeah,
then
I'll put the link in there for her. I'll find the link real quick
Okay.
and then I'll put that in there for you so that you can access that one for online screen time. And we do have, Kate, that brings up a great question because, you know, we have our devices and our campuses now. So most of our students, grades 3 through up, do have a Chromebook in the classroom. And we do have some parents that are completely set against using any electronics, so they're not able to use it in the classroom. Do you have any guidance on that? Like, because it, you know, it does kind of become a disservice to the student who's not learning the same online techniques that all the other students are. But that's a great question.
Yeah, it's so, and kind of going back to it too, I think that there was, yeah, so I would suggest watching that presentation, and because I really go into it and talk about it by age levels. But also, like Dana said, it's hard because on like tablet time and online time is such a loaded, it's such a loaded question because a lot of parents have their own, they've seen the research and, you know, but then we also, as teachers, they're using it as tools in the classroom. And so we as parents have to navigate where that line is, because then the concern is, well, they're going to be on their screens all day at school. And then the teacher's concern is, well, if we don't show them how to use and access these things in a safe and smart manner, then we're not teaching them how to utilize the technology. Whereas most of us as parents grew up learning it as it became accessible to us. And so it's a really tough one, Dana. I don't think there's an easy answer for it. I think that, you know, what I've seen work best time and time again is having clear discussions with your kids, even the ones that are young, about what this means. Okay, so in school, you're going to have access to your, you know, Chromebook or your tablet to do blank or blank. But at home, here's our rules. What becomes tricky too is as their peers get online and their peers start to really communicate and engage outside of the classroom and outside of their typical outside social life. And then that becomes the next big kicker.
Yeah, they kind of get to see it anyway.
Yeah.
And then there was another comment from Catherine. She said pictures were also helpful for the routine. So that's a great idea. We use pictures a lot for our students who may not be who may be nonverbal. They still follow the routines as everyone else does by the use of pictures. Thank you, Catherine, for that.
Yeah. And the best kind of strategy that I've seen, like if you have 2 seconds, just draw a stick figure. But if you've got time and you're making some sort of beautiful routine, I highly suggest pictures of the kid doing those different steps in the routine, because then they can see themselves do it. And for some reason, that just helps kind of get over that hump sometimes. Like, I can't do it. I can't brush my teeth. Well, here's a picture of you brushing your teeth in your routine. So that leads us to talking about routines. So what we see with routines is that, you know, like I said earlier, all kids need routines and benefit from routines. Okay. Routines give them consistency. They give them structure. I'm not saying be, you know, like super strict about your routine and like, I'm sorry, we can't do that because that's going to deviate from our routine. No, but what it means is that when you have these routines, then when you do deviate from it, that's okay. And your kids will still be regulated and you'll still be regulated. And then the next day you can go back to your routine. It's okay to break routines. That's something that parents sometimes get worried about. They're like, we build these beautiful routines and finally things, you know, bedtime's going better. We just can't go sleep anywhere else. And it's like, well, you can. Now they have this ability to stretch and grow due to the routines. I made the last part of the presentation a little bit more jazzy to keep you guys awake. So like I said, you know, with routine, what we know is that kids have less stress. When they have their predictability, they know what's going to happen. We'll talk about what good routines look like, but, you know, we know that behavior is better across the board when stress is lower. Okay. So routines are very helpful for families as well. Whenever families come in and talk to me and they're like, we're just, you know, even for families of teens, you know, like we're just all doing different things at different places, or, you know, we're talking, you know, my husband and I are talking at each other, but, you know, we aren't collaborating, or my partner, you know, is trying this, but I want to do this. And so we'll sit and we'll make a routine, and then everybody can be on the same page. It can be, you know, you know, I talk here about how it can be like daily rituals. You can talk about it with your kids like that. We use the words routine in our family. Got to follow your morning routine, and pointing them to it. It can also give them a time, and depending on what your routine looks like, if you have a calendar that you guys calendar every week and you talk about what's lunch and what's dinner, and it can be a time where they get excited for something too, like, oh my gosh, we're having mac and cheese on Wednesday, yay. So, you know, it's a little thing. Oops, sorry. There we go. Okay. So developing effective routines is basically, you want to keep them simple. The simpler, the better, because then you'll keep up with it as a parent, and then they'll be able to follow it. Make it visual in any way that you can make it visual or concrete. Make them family decisions. So like I was just saying, if he can go through and pick out his morning, because so little time of their day is given to kids to choose what they want to do. You know, get in the car, get up, do this, do that. I'm gonna delete this. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's bothering me. You know, if you give them that autonomy or control over their routines, you're going to see a lot better results and more, not compliance, but more agreement with the routines if they have kind of that choice of it. The other thing is you got to be consistent. The hardest thing with routines for parents is keeping up with it. That's why you got to keep it simple. And if there's times like maybe weekdays you have your morning and evening routines, but weekends you're off, that's fine too. That's okay, because that's actually part of your routine. I also suggest on here having family meetings. And so a family meeting is, you know, I link a more formal one, but really it's just it's a discussion with your family about things that are coming up or topics that you need to discuss. You can have a family meeting at the dinner table. That's when we do it. You can also have a family meeting set aside if there's like a certain time of day that works best for your family. But having these discussions and helping your kids take more control is really key. Okay, here's some simple routines. This could be a routine for a younger child, or it could be a routine for an older child. It's got your steps and it's got it all laid out to you so that you can put it away very easily too, because that's just as important. Here's a different one too. Same thing with those pictures. You know, here's my to-dos, and then this is what happens when they're finished. I put them on here. Okay. I have a picture later on of what my family routine looks like. It is nothing as cute or fancy. Sometimes you just got to do what's the simplest. Sometimes you have a really creative 9-year-old who wants to make their own routine and make it beautiful. Okay. To get the buy-in, like I said, having them create their own is super important. And then also having variable reinforcements. I'm reinforced for my job. I get paid. I like reinforcements. So do your kids. The variable reinforcements just means that it's not every time, it's every so often. And so the reinforcement could be, hey, you finished your morning routine. Now you have time to read. That's a reinforcement in itself, getting to do something you want. Or a reinforcement can be you extrinsically motivating them, like, hey, amazing job on this. Now, you know, we've had 5 nights of a great evening routine, and, you know, no one's cried. Still waiting on that one, but, you know, no one's cried. Like, let's go out and, you know, go for a family walk tonight or something fun. Let's do something different or watch a movie. You know, it can be something like that, or it can be a very simple, just like natural consequence that's a reinforcer, is that you have more time to do what you want to do. not to be redundant, but I guess to be consistent, consistency is the most important part. Okay. So making sure that you are following that routine with them, regularly checking in. It's not like something you can create and then just be like, bye, that's amazing. We did great. We made it. You got to check in with them and make sure they're following those routines. And being a good listener. If they're like, this doesn't work, I hate this routine. Okay, why? What about it doesn't work? Well, I don't like having to brush my teeth before I eat breakfast. Okay, well, let's change it up. But that could be something where they just might stop following the routine. But if you talk with them about it, they'll explain why. And so making sure that you're being a good listener for that. This is what our routine looks like. We have like a command center blackboard. Obviously, it's not cute. The 2-year-old has rubbed her hands along it. It's, but it works. We've got what's going on for lunch at school, what's going on for dinner at home, morning routine, afternoon routine. They look at it, they don't check it off anymore, but they use it as a tool. So looking at these kind of developmentally appropriate routines, and I'm going to kind of zoom through this. This is my last slide. So we have time for questions if people have questions. But when you're teaching a child how to do a new routine or a chore, making sure that you don't just say, now you're going to take out the trash. Show them how to do it. Do it alongside with them. Even though they've seen you do it a million times and they should be able to do it, sometimes you'll get behavior and pushback if they're like, I don't know how to fold clothes. I don't know how to do this. Okay, let's do it together. And then count it as some, parent-child bonding time. The other thing for your smaller kids, and this is something that I see in the Montessori classroom, that they're all about independence there, but like have child-sized things. Like, okay, your kid can't push a vacuum, but can they take a mini vac and vacuum around the table where all those crumbs get? Yes, they can. Also making sure when you are doing these tests and helping them that you're doing it at a time, especially when you're teaching them how to do it, that you're taking time. This is something that I struggle with, is like, I'm like, okay, we got to do all this cleaning or we got to do all these chores. Let's do it fast. And nobody ever likes to be rushed when they're trying to learn how to do something. So really taking your time, showing them how to do it and giving them that time. Making sure that you have fun with it too. Like chores, it sounds awful, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something that's fun. Like, hey, we all turn on loud music. If you have kids that like loud music, we all turn on loud music and we knock out the cleaning for, X amount of time. Or we turn on a song and everyone has to pick up during that one song. Like everyone has to pick up as many things as they can and put them away. You can make it fun depending on your energy level. There's times when I do not have that energy level and I'm like, just do it. But that doesn't work as well as when I do have energy and I'm more fun. Making sure, this is something else that I struggle with, is making sure that you kind of let go of that perfection. If you have somebody else that is, folding clothes or putting dishes away, it might not be done the way you expect it to be done, but you can use it as a teaching moment. But it can sometimes be a hard thing that comes up for parents when they're first starting to have kids really take over some of those pieces. And like I said, making sure you're scaffolding those skills and enjoying yourself. Okay. All right. So that's it for my presentation. Like I said, I would leave some time at the end for questions. I didn't leave quite as much time as I promised. But does anybody have any questions that they want me to address?
And this is Jennifer. I had a question, and it's actually an offshoot of the comment that was put in the chat. So a lot of the routines that you were showing were focused on the child, right? How to help a child or the children get ready in the morning or after school, et cetera. Yeah. But I too am finding that in order for routines to truly be successful, it's got to encompass the entire family. So the adults kind of have a routine that also includes the child or the children's routine. So can you comment on how we can create routine or even better manage what I would call coexisting routines to make sure we manage stress properly and all of the activity that goes on outside of just the child?
So I think it really depends on the kid's developmental age and their basically their egocentricness. I think that's the word, because sometimes you might be doing these things alongside. You might have it written out that this is my routine, this is your routine, or this is our family cohesive routine. but they might not be super aware of it. So you're just wasting your breath. But especially when they're in that like 5 and up range, that's when you can really start to do that cohesive, we're as a family doing this routine. And what we'll do is like, morning times are a little different for my family, especially because my focus is getting them out to school on time in as regulated of state as possible. And so that looks a little different because but for my family per se, but on the weekends when we do our family kind of like planning for the weekend, like, oh, what are we doing? Let's sit together and plan it out. Then we'll add in all of our stuff together and make it more cohesive. So if you're wanting to discuss what it would look like to have a more cohesive family routine, it just depends on what you want that routine to look like and then how you want to make it concrete, simple, and easy to follow. And following up.
I think the perspective I have is more, as a parent, there may be parts of the routine that I follow as a parent that my child may not know about, and I may choose not to tell them because they don't really need the burden, right? But there is a recognition of making sure as a caregiver or parent, you're taking care of yourself as you're also enabling the right environment and quite frankly, the right mindset for you to care and guide your child through their routine as well. So that's why I wanted to get your thoughts on the best way to manage that aspect of it. To be frank, I've established great routines for my children. The challenge always comes in the implementation because of the complexity of everyone else's life around them. So that's why I wanted to get your take on that.
I think that's a great question. I put in the chat, we actually did a session on starting the year off right with routines. And I put the link to that workshop in the chat as well. But I think that's true. And what I do with my kids is both at school, my hundreds of them at school and mine as at home, is they know that there's always a reason of why we do what we do. So even when we're building routines, here is the reason why we need this routine to be put into place. So after you do that for so long, they know, well, we've got to be doing it for a reason. It's not just because I want to torture you by making you get up 5 minutes early. And that kind of builds that respect and that rapport that allows them to know that they're safe and this is something that has to happen, and kind of prevent some of those tantrums that often happen when we start to implement routines.
To go back a little bit to what Jennifer was saying, though, I do think it's really important. We call it like verbal cueing. So basically to help them see that you're doing things like for yourself, for self-care, or, and it might even be like, I don't know what yours looks like, but it might be like, I need to go and walk around the block because I need to take that time for my brain and my body. But like saying it verbally to them really helps, especially for younger kids, because they don't know, or it's not that they don't care, but it's not a blip in their radar. So just making sure that you're verbalizing it to them can help them identify, oh my gosh, oh, I didn't know, or, and it helps them understand too, how to take care of themselves in the long term. I put my email on there too. Someone said, can you ask me questions offline? Yes. And I do parent coaching. That's part of what I do, is helping parents with these, like, if you have more individual questions, is we do that. Okay. All right. I don't see any other questions, Dana.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this Lunch and Learn. I did want to share with you all that our next month's Lunch and Learn will be March 1st. And the subject will be Let's Tobacco About It. We'll be talking about tobacco, vaping, fentanyl, with our partners from Life Steps. And I'll send this out. You'll see this on social media as well, so that you can, because I already have your information, I'll show this out with you guys as we get closer to March. In addition to Let's Talk About It with us, where as parents and families, we'll also be having the conversations at our schools with our students. And you'll see more posters around the campuses as we do that. And then our last one is going to be April 12th. Kate will be back with Sibling Rivalry. So this will be good for you guys that have kids who tend to get at each other. It is normal in most cases, but she'll share more with you all about that. I will share the link to this presentation after it gets up on our YouTube channel. And you are welcome to send either one of us emails about anything you guys want to see as we prepare our workshops for next year. We're here for you. So whatever it is that you guys want us to share with you or that we can enlighten you guys on, we would love to be able to share that. Some of the other workshops that we have, besides, as I pull this up, I put them in the chat, starting the year off right with routines. And then we have my child is glued to their screen. So we did a lot of screen time. We also did one on navigating the special education maze. If you have a 504 or a SPED student, you might want to check out our YouTube channel on that course that we had. And we're actually here for you guys. So anything you need, we're here for. We appreciate your time. And I thank you all. I hope y'all have a great day. Thank you for joining us. We're closing right at 1 o'clock. Yay! We made it on time. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate you all.